Elias Thorne was a man who found comfort in numbers and the quiet rhythm of predictable days. His world was one of clean lines and clear sums, a sprawling Montana ranch where he knew the exact count of his cattle and the precise yield of each field. His ledgers were perfectly balanced, his fences were always mended, and his house was in impeccable order. Yet each evening, as the vast western sky filled with stars, a deep silence settled over the homestead. It was a silence that echoed through the empty rooms, a quiet that numbers could not fill. He was a prosperous man, but he was a lonely one. The idea did not come to him in a sudden burst of passion, but as a practical solution to a problem he had neatly identified. He needed a partner, someone to share the daily burdens, and to fill the quiet house with a presence other than his own. He sought a woman of sensible character, one who appreciated hard work and simple pleasures. Hearing of a reputable service that facilitated introductions by mail, he composed a letter. He described his life with honest brevity, outlining his needs and the modest companionship he could offer in return. Weeks later, a reply arrived from a small town in Maine. The woman's name was Clara. Her letter was not long, but it was thoughtful. She wrote of a life spent caring for an ailing father, of a fondness for baking, and of a resilience forged by hardship. She spoke of a desire for a true partnership built on mutual respect and shared labor. Elias read her words carefully. He found them to be direct and earnest, qualities he valued highly. In his mind, he constructed an image of her, a woman of average stature and calm demeanor, someone who would fit seamlessly into the orderly life he had built. A subsequent letter from the agency mentioned a minor complication. A recent flood in their office had damaged some files, and Clara's photograph had been among those lost. They assured him of her good character and asked if he wished to proceed. Elias considered this. He was a man who trusted facts and words over fleeting images. Her letters had provided a more than adequate portrait of her spirit. A picture, he decided, was unnecessary. He sent the money for a train ticket east, confident in his decision. He had all the information he required. He had ordered a wife based on the solid facts of character, and he awaited her arrival with the quiet certainty of a man who believed he had made a very sound investment, far from the orderly world of Elias Thorne. Clara stood on a rocky Maine shoreline, the Atlantic wind whipping strands of dark hair across her face. Her life had been one of duty and quiet strength, defined by the care of her frail father in their small, salt-weathered cottage. She was a woman built from necessity, her broad shoulders accustomed to lifting a sick man, her capable hands skilled at mending nets and kneading dough. Her size, which often drew stares in town, was simply a fact of her existence, a physical expression of the resilience she carried within after her father's passing. The cottage felt immense with loneliness. The future stretched before her, a narrow path of limited choices in a town that saw her as an oddity. When she saw the advertisement from a Montana rancher, something in his straightforward words resonated with her practical nature. His letter spoke of hard work and honesty, of a desire for a partner, not a porcelain doll. She wrote back with equal directness, revealing her character, but withholding a description of her frame. A deep-seated fear, born of a lifetime of whispered comments, told her that a photograph would end the conversation before it began. She believed her worth was in her work and her word, not in her appearance. Packing her few belongings was a simple task. She folded her sturdy dresses and placed her most precious possessions in a small trunk. Her mother's worn recipe book, and a perfectly balanced rolling pin. Each was a token of the life she was leaving, a promise of the comfort she hoped to bring to a new one. Selling her father's old pocket watch paid for the few extras she would need for the long journey. She was not embarking on this adventure for romance, but for the chance to build something real, to offer her strength and loyalty to a man who had asked for just those things. The train ride west was a revelation of a changing landscape. The dense forests of the east gradually giving way to the vast, open plains. With every mile, her anxiety and hope grew in equal measure. She clutched her ticket, a slip of paper that was her tether to a new beginning and a man who knew nothing of the woman who was coming to meet him. She prayed his heart was as large as the country she was crossing, that he would see the partner she longed to be, and not just the unexpected form she arrived in. She was placing her entire future in the hands of a stranger, trusting that the character in his letters would be enough to welcome all of her. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, a perfect autumn day in Montana. Elias Thorne stood before the mirror in his bedroom, adjusting the stiff collar of his new suit. He practiced a small, formal smile in the glass, expression meant to convey quiet satisfaction. Today was the logical conclusion of a well-reasoned plan. The train would arrive at precisely 1:15, allowing just enough time for his bride to freshen up before the ceremony at 3 o'clock. He had arranged everything with his usual efficiency, even ensuring the church would be filled with the gentle light of the afternoon sun. In his mind, he pictured a modest woman with a calm demeanor, a sensible dress, and a shy smile, stepping gracefully into the life he had meticulously prepared for her. The absence of a photograph was a minor detail, now forgotten. He had the facts. He had the letters. He knew the character of the woman he was to marry. The little church was indeed filled with that soft golden light, just as he had hoped. Every pew was occupied by his friends and neighbors, their faces warm with curiosity and goodwill. Elias stood rigidly at the altar, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. The air smelled of beeswax and the faint, sweet scent of the late wildflowers placed in vases by the windowsill. He could hear the rustle of fabric and the low, friendly murmur of the congregation. He checked his pocket watch for the third time. The train was right on schedule. A sense of profound rightness settled over him. This was the correct choice. This was the orderly next step. He allowed himself a small, private breath of satisfaction. Then, the distant but unmistakable wail of the train whistle cut through the calm afternoon. A hush fell over the church. This was the moment. Elias straightened his back, his heart beating a steady, confident rhythm. All eyes turned toward the heavy wooden doors at the back of the church. The preacher, an old friend, gave Elias a reassuring nod. The seconds stretched out, filled with a palpable sense of anticipation. Elias imagined the scene outside, the hiss of steam, the clatter of doors, his bride stepping onto the platform, a small trunk in her hand, looking around for the man who was to be her husband. The church doors did not open with a gentle push. They were pulled inward with a firm, decisive motion that made the hinges groan. The sunlight from outside, which had been streaming softly through the windows, was suddenly blocked by an immense silhouette that filled the entire doorway. A collective, silent gasp seemed to suck all the air from the room. Elias's confident smile froze on his face. This was not a modest silhouette. This was not a calm demeanor made flesh. The figure had to duck slightly to clear the top of the doorframe before stepping fully into the church. The woman who began her walk down the aisle was a stranger to every expectation Elias had ever held. She was not merely tall, she was monumental. Her shoulders were broad and solid. Her presence so commanding it seemed to alter the very atmosphere in the room. The floorboards, which had been silent under the steps of the congregation, announced her progress with low, resonant creaks. Her dress was a simple, serviceable navy blue, but it was stretched across a form of such formidable proportions that it became a testament to sheer substance. Her face was strong and honest, framed by thick, dark hair, and her eyes, the color of rich soil, were fixed on him with an unsettling directness. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. His heart was no longer beating a confident rhythm. It was a frantic, trapped bird fluttering against his ribs. This could not be Clara. This could not be the woman from the letters. This was a mistake, a terrible, colossal error in calculation. His mind raced, scrambling through the neat files of his memory for the descriptions in her letters. She had written of baking, of solitude, of practicality. He had deduced a small, efficient woman. He had not deduced this. He stood utterly paralyzed, his planned smile now a grotesque mask of shock. He could feel the stares of his neighbors burning into him, could sense their bewildered silence. He was a man who had ordered a specific item from a catalogue and had been delivered something entirely, bewilderingly different. The world he had so carefully built on logic and order was tilting on its axis, and he was powerless to stop it. The woman, his bride, reached his side. She towered over him. Her shadow fell across him, and Elias Thorne, a man who had never believed in anything he could not measure, felt a tremor of pure, unadulterated fear. The preacher began to speak, his voice sounding very far away. The wagon ride back to the ranch was a journey taken in a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. Elias held the reins with white-knuckled hands, his gaze fixed rigidly on the road ahead. He could not bring himself to look at the woman beside him, a woman whose presence seemed to fill not just the seat, but the entire wagon bed. The cheerful chirping of the evening birds and the steady clop of the horses' hooves only seemed to amplify the awkward void between them. Every slight lurch of the wagon made him acutely aware of the shift in balance caused by her considerable weight. He felt a hot mix of embarrassment and a simmering anger that felt both justified and terribly uncharitable. He helped her down from the wagon. his hands barely making contact with her elbow, and led the way into his home. The house that had always felt spacious and orderly to him now seemed to shrink, the walls pressing inwards. He showed her to the small spare bedroom, the one he used for storing ledgers and old tools, which he had hastily cleared out that morning. His voice was a stiff, formal thing when he spoke. "This will be your room," the statement hung in the air, a clear and unmistakable boundary. He then retreated to the kitchen, busying himself with stoking the fire he did not need, putting a physical barrier of stone and hearth between them. Clara did not complain. She placed her small trunk at the foot of the narrow bed and looked around the room. She then simply got to work. She moved through the house with a quiet efficiency, unpacking her few things. Elias watched her from the corners of his eyes, his body tense. He saw her navigate his kitchen, her large hands surprisingly graceful as she found a pot and filled it with water from the pump. She began preparing a simple stew, the rhythmic chop of vegetables the only sound in the house. Elias could not stay. The domesticity of it felt like an invasion. He muttered something about checking the north fence and fled outside into the cooling evening air, grateful for the vastness of the land. The following days settled into a pattern of quiet avoidance. Elias rose before dawn and spent every waking hour outside, finding tasks that did not need doing. He checked fences he had mended the week before. He counted cattle 3 times over. He stayed out until the last possible moment, until the sky was black and the house was dark, except for a single lamp left burning for him. He would enter to find a plate of food kept warm in the oven, a loaf of fresh bread on the counter. The house was always spotless, the smell of soap and baked goods a constant, gentle reproach to his coldness. He would eat in silence, alone at the table, and retreat to his room. Clara, for her part, was a ghost in his home. She was always working, but she did it without disturbing the careful order of his world. She tended the small vegetable patch behind the house. She patched a pair of his trousers she found in a mending basket. She was patient, her calmness a stark contrast to his inner turmoil. She was waiting, though for what? She herself was not entirely sure. She had come for a partnership, and she found herself living as a quiet, unwanted guest in a beautifully kept museum of one man's loneliness. Each kindness she offered, each loaf of bread, was a silent question. And each evening, Elias's retreat was his answer, a rejection of the magnificent, unexpected woman who had arrived on his doorstep. The house was cleaner and smelled better than ever before, but the silence between them was colder than the Montana winter soon to come. The change in the weather was not a gentle suggestion, but a violent pronouncement. One moment the sky was a clear, pale blue, and the next it was a churning, bruised grey. A bitter wind, carrying the metallic scent of snow, screamed down from the mountains, whipping across the open plains of Elias's ranch with a furious intent. It was a blizzard, arriving weeks too early, a betrayal of the usual orderly progression of the seasons. Elias, who was checking the herd in the far north pasture, felt the temperature plummet. He turned his collar up against the stinging wind, his mind already calculating the risk to his cattle. This was a problem he understood, a tangible threat he could confront. He urged his horse forward, intent on driving the animals toward the relative shelter of Alawa Valley. The world quickly dissolved into a blinding, white chaos. The wind howled, erasing landmarks and horizon alike. Snow fell not in flakes, but in driving, horizontal sheets that felt like needles against his skin. Visibility dropped to mere feet. Elias, a man who knew every inch of his land, became disoriented. The familiar grove of aspens he used as a marker was just a ghostly shimmer in the swirling white. His horse, spooked by the ferocity of the storm, whinnied in panic and shied away from a sudden gust. The ground beneath them, a patch of earth hidden by early drift, was slick with ice. The horse's legs slid out from under it. Elias was thrown from the saddle with a force that knocked the air from his lungs. He landed hard on the frozen ground, a sharp, sickening pain exploding in his leg as it twisted beneath him. The horse, righting itself, bolted into the whiteness and was gone. Elias was alone, trapped in a ravine, the snow already beginning to cover him. He tried to stand, but the pain was a white-hot fire that stole his breath and his hope. The cold was a creeping numbness, seeping through his clothes, and for the first time in his life, Elias Thorne felt a fear that was beyond calculation. He was going to die out here, alone in the frozen silence. Back at the house, Clara heard the storm's fury escalate with a deepening dread. She stood at the window, watching the world vanish behind a wall of white. Elias was out there. He had been gone for hours.
This was not a simple squall, it was a killer.
A practical woman, she did not succumb to panic.
She moved with a grim purpose.
She pulled on her heaviest wool coat and wrapped a thick scarf around her head. Her size, so often a point of awkwardness in the civilized world of houses and churches, was now her greatest asset.
She was solid, a bastion against the wind.
She pushed out into the blizzard, the force of the gale feeling like a physical wall. She called his name, but the wind stole the words from her lips the moment they were spoken. She knew she would not hear him.
She would have to find him, using the fence line as her only guide. She began to walk, leaning into the wind, her boots crunching through the deepening snow. Her eyes, smarting from the cold, scanned the blinding whiteness for any irregularity, any shadow that should not be there.
She fought for every step, her immense strength, the only thing keeping her upright against the storm's relentless push. It was a brutal, slow progress, a battle of sheer will against nature's indifference.
Just as a cold despair began to whisper at the edges of her own mind, she saw it, a darker patch in the snow-filled ravine.
And then she saw him, a huddled figure already half buried. Elias, his consciousness fading in and out from the pain and the cold, saw a figure emerge from the white gloom.
It was not a delicate shape.
It was a large, solid form, a powerful silhouette against the blowing snow. For a disoriented moment, he thought it was a bear. Then he heard his name, spoken in that low, familiar cello of a voice, a sound that cut through the storm's scream.
Clara did not hesitate. She half slid, half climbed down into the ravine.
She saw his twisted leg, his pale face. Without a word, she bent down. She moved him with a careful, sure strength he could never have possessed, her hands firm and capable. She got him upright then. With a grunt of effort, she lifted him.
Elias, a fully grown man, was carried in her arms as if he were a child.
She carried him back along the fence line, following her own fading footprints, her progress slow and relentless, a monument of determination moving against the dying light.
She did not stop until she shouldered open the farmhouse door and laid him gently before the fire.
Saving the life of the man who had done nothing but wish her gone. The world for Elias Thorne shrank to the confines of the one armchair by the hearth. His leg, splintered and throbbing with a dull, persistent ache, was a constant reminder of his folly and his rescue. He was a prisoner of his own helplessness, forced into a stillness that was utterly foreign to him. For the first time since Clara's arrival, he could not flee to the fields.
He was tethered to the house, and to the formidable presence of the woman who moved through it with a quiet competence that began to feel less like an intrusion and more like a lifeline. In the days that followed, he watched her.
Truly watched her.
He saw the effortless way she managed the household tasks that had always been a chore for him. He observed the gentle efficiency with which she changed the bandages on his leg, her large hands surprisingly deft and never causing him unnecessary pain.
He listened, really listened, as she spoke while she worked. She told him about the fierce Atlantic storms that battered the Maine coast, stories that made the Montana blizzard seem almost mild. She spoke of her father's long illness, not with self-pity, but with a matter-of-fact resilience that spoke of deep character.
He heard the same practical, thoughtful woman from the letters, her voice now given a body, a history, and a profound strength he had been too blind to see. He began to notice the small things. The way the squeaky hinge on the barn door he had been meaning to fix for months was now silent. The loose porch step that no longer wobbled underfoot. The rich, yeasty smell of the bread she baked each morning. A smell that now meant warmth and safety instead of a reminder of his own failure. He tasted her soups and stews, and they were the most delicious things he had ever eaten. Food that seemed to heal him from the inside out. Each loaf of bread, each repaired fixture, each quiet act of care was a testament to the partner she had promised to be. A deep and shameful understanding began to dawn on him. He had been a fool of the highest order.
He had ordered a wife like he would order a new plow, expecting specific dimensions and functions.
He had received not just a partner, but a magnificent, unexpected upgrade to his entire life. Her size was not a trick, it was an asset.
Her strength was not something to be feared, but something that had literally saved him.
He had been so focused on the vessel that he had completely ignored the priceless treasure within.
The coldness he had shown her, his retreats to the fields, his silent meals, now played in his memory like a chronicle of his own small-mindedness.
He had been offered a gift of immense value, and had tried to send it back unopened. As he sat by the fire, the warmth on his skin felt like the dawning of a long overdue grace.
And Elias Thorne, a man of letters and logic, finally opened his heart to the facts that truly mattered. The silence in the house finally broke on an evening much like the one before the storm.
The fire crackled warmly, casting dancing shadows on the walls.
Elias had been practicing the words in his head for days, but they still felt clumsy and inadequate.
He looked across the room at Clara, who was mending one of his shirts, her large hands moving with a patient, rhythmic grace.
He took a deep breath, the sound loud in the quiet room. "Clara," he began, his voice rough with unused emotion.
She looked up, her dark eyes meeting his, and he saw no judgment in them, only a quiet patience that shamed him further.
"I owe you more than an apology."
"I owe you my life, and my gratitude is the smallest part of that debt." He struggled to find the right words, the logical man faltering before the task of explaining a heart he had only just begun to understand.
"I was blind. I thought I had ordered one thing and received another. I was a fool.
I see now that I was given everything I asked for, and so much more. Your strength, your kindness, your patience. I did not deserve any of it." He paused, gathering his courage. "The woman in the letters was you."
"All along, it was you. I was just too stubborn to see that the package was even better than the description." A single tear, one he did not try to hide, traced a path down his cheek.
"This house,
it was just a building before you came."
"You didn't just walk into my house, Clara. You walked into my life and you made it a home." Clara set her mending aside.
The warm, genuine smile that broke across her face seemed to light the entire room.
She moved to sit in the chair beside him, and instead of feeling overshadowed, Elias felt encompassed by her presence, comforted by it. "Elias," she said, her voice that low, comforting cello hum that he now loved.
"I knew you were a good man. I just had to wait for you to remember it yourself. From that day forward, everything changed."
The spare bedroom was emptied of her things and became a storage room once more. The cold, careful distance between them melted away, replaced by a partnership that was everything Elias had originally wanted and infinitely more than he had ever dreamed.
Clara's strength became a legend on the ranch, not as a curiosity, but as a respected asset.
Her baking became famous at town socials. The house was no longer quiet, but filled with the sounds of shared work and easy laughter.
Elias learned that the best things in life are not ordered from a catalogue, but are built with trust, gratitude, and the willingness to embrace a wonderful, unexpected surprise. They built a life together, a perfect fit in every way that truly mattered, and lived out their days in the warm, vibrant home they had created. The end